I don't know about you, but making art for video games is kind of hard, especially if you have no art background like me. Unfortunately, I never seem to come up with game ideas that do not require good art skills, and my current project Returner is not an exception. So I'm making Returner, a Metroidvania game where you can possess any enemy and make use of their abilities for combat and traversal, and it requires tons of art. During my exploration for Returner's art development, I tried out so many art programs: Creator, GIMP or GIMP, Adobe Animate, Tahoma2D, OpenToons, Synfig, and so on. But none of them felt comfortable enough for me to use, even after many weeks of practice. I know it takes years to master art, and the general idea is to be very patient when you are learning how to draw. But for me, I really needed something I could pick up easily without much learning. I had two criterias. Number one, it has to be a vector program because I think vector art is easier for beginners, and it also has to be free or at least require only a one-time payment, which is why Adobe Animate is out of the question. All the programs I tried just did not fit what I wanted, and trust me, I tried out everything. It took me a couple of months to settle on what I eventually chose. I even initially did a ton of work in Tahoma2D before I bailed out of it. It just felt too professional for what I wanted to do, and the learning curve was too steep for me. It felt like I needed years to master it. Synfig could have been the go-to option, but in my few days of trying it out, I had a terrible experience with it. It was so buggy and it crashed so much on Mac that I could barely manage to save a file. So I gave up and tried to power through using Tahoma2D. But I just wasn't enjoying myself at all. At some point I told myself, it's hard enough to find motivation to finish a game. Do I really want to make my art process even more tedious? So I did the only logical thing. Took some time off and strategized. Suddenly I remembered, wait, I already know how to use Figma, which is definitely capable of making vector arts. Why didn't I think of this earlier? Why have I been wasting so much time? Why did I leave my comfort zone to look for something that's not lost? The thing I realized is that I wanted to feel like I was being professional. That's why I turned to all these traditional art softwares. Using Figma for my art made me feel like I was not doing things the right way. That was stupid of me though. I realized that result is the only thing that matters. You could decide to use a stone tablet to draw your game art and no one will care if you end up making a fun and amazing game. Realizing this, I went back to Figma. You might be asking, why Figma? Well, you see, I'm a UX designer by day, so I've been using Figma daily for the past 6 years. I know the ins and the outs of Figma. I could close my eyes and navigate its interface. So yeah, I was more comfortable in Figma than anywhere else. Unfortunately, Figma is not a traditional art program. It met my criteria of being a vector program with an infinite canvas, but it did not have the most important feature of an animation program, an animation timeline. I couldn't even use something as simple as onion skin. But I didn't let that stop me, so I did the only logical thing. I created an animation timeline myself in Figma. Yeah, I literally wrote my own animation timeline plugin for Figma with onion skin support that can also export my animations to a sprite sheet. And oh my god, it was worth it. It's not the most amazing or performance animation tool out there, but it's simple and does the job, and that's exactly what I've been looking for in all these softwares. Something very easy to use that works without the other endless features catering to professional artists and animators that I had no interest in being. So, how exactly have I been using Figma for my art? There are a couple of features in Figma that make my life easier as a game dev with no art background. The first one is the components feature. You see, in Figma, there is a feature that allows you to draw multiple assets or parts of your character and reuse them in multiple places, kind of like prefabs in Unity or scenes in Godot. But that's not the best part. You can make changes to the main components and apply those changes all through your artwork. Let me show you what that looks like. So I can decide to say, you know what, on my idle animation, I want the player to always face the front, and then suddenly it just changed, and that's because I've already set it as a component here. And that good thing about it is I can easily go here and say the color of the eyes is not looking well, so let me change that to red, and let's see what happens. Once I do that, it just changes all through my animation, and that's really great. In most traditional softwares, animation softwares that uses raster drawing, you might not be able to do something like this, and that can be very tedious, especially if you are not an animator by trade. So this just makes it very easy. The same thing happens with the sword. You know what? I don't really like this blade as the weapon. I think I want something different, maybe a sequel or something, and I can just change that, and it changes all through my animation. So that's a really great thing. So I can also change the color of the sword to say, let's give that a white sword, and that changes. The same thing with the arms. I can decide to change the pattern on the arms, and then everything changes everywhere. I can decide to make the limbs shorter, and then yeah, my character becomes a character with short limbs. That's amazing, isn't it? But the thing is, I'm not using components for everything, so it doesn't become too mechanical. So the only things I have as components is I have the head, I have the hands, both hands. I also have the legs as components, because I feel like those are the things that can be really easy to replicate across board. I could have just made the body a component too, and then just have multiple of those. But I felt that would make it become too mechanical. It will be very difficult to have those amazing poses you want to have, unless you want to have like hundreds of these components that you can choose from. That might be a great idea for smaller characters, but I think keeping it minimal, it makes it very easy to manage, and it just makes it much more unique and easy to come up with new amazing ideas without restricting yourself too much. So yeah, that's it about components in Figma. This has really helped my workflow. It has made it faster, and it has really made it easy for me to just iterate on these drawings and animations as fast as possible. This little feature right here helps make my art much more consistent than it would have been. My art is still rough around the edges, but it's better than what I would have been able to produce in a traditional art software. Let's talk about my animator plugin and what it does. Since Figma is not a traditional art software, it has the animation timeline and features that are trivial to these tools. It gets really difficult to make proper animations in Figma. The major issue being the absence of onion scaling. Onion scaling in animation is simply being able to overlay previous and next frames on a current frame, so you can properly draw and time your animations. You could manually do this in Figma by copying, pasting, and adjusting the opacity of other frames on the current frame, but that's just tedious work that's going to slow down my art process even more. Lucky enough for me, you can easily extend Figma's capabilities by writing plugins for it, though it required me to brush up on my HTML and TypeScript skills. So the first thing I did was to create a way to add multiple frames to a timeline and then be able to turn on the onion skins for these frames. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done. When I got this done, it was magical. I felt like I already had all I needed. In practice, this simple onion skinning feature was not enough for me to get things done, but I didn't stop there, did I? So I started working on animation playback. Figma has this thing called prototype that allows you to connect multiple frames together by dragging nodes in between them and setting how each frame will respond to the previous frame. The problem is that it's a very manual process that was intended for testing small design flows, not animations. Lucky enough for me, Figma's API provided a way for me to automate this. So now, with a single click of a button, I can connect all the frames of my animation and set the playback to any frame rate I want, without having to connect each frame manually. Again, after adding this, my process was improved. I could even set a frame hold on each frame. Now that I had two of the major features I needed done, there was still an important step. How do I get my animations into the game engine? In animation softwares, the answer is easy. Export a sprite sheet of the animation timeline. In my case, I couldn't just do that since I wrote the animation timeline myself. Initially, I was manually arranging these frames and exporting the image as sprite sheets. A few weeks in, I realized how unsustainable that was, so I extended my plugin to allow me export sprite sheets with a click of a button. Now I just select the frames I need to export, click the export button, and I get a 4-column sprite sheet that I can easily use directly in my game engine. So technically, that's my art process using a non-traditional animation software and workflow. I estimate it must have taken me about a week of part-time development time developing this plugin and workflow, but I think it's worth it since learning an art software will require much more time than 1 week. Also, I think developing personal processes like this adds a layer of uniqueness to games that can't be easily replicated. I'm not here advocating for you to go out of your way to build an elaborate software or process for your game dev journey. I just think it's very important to get yourself close to a process that reduces the tediousness of game dev as much as possible. For me, that's meant finding a way to make use of a software I was already used to for 6 years to make my arts. While this makes my process easy, it still does not magically solve all my arts deficiencies. I'm still doing a lot of studying, learning, and experimentation to make sure I produce something of quality. It's just easier for me than it could have been. I hope you enjoyed this dev story. It's not really on the technical side of things, it's more in line with what I wished someone had told me when I started my game dev journey. I decided stories like this that do not really show the game progress will be separate from devlogs, and I intend to do this kind of videos once in a while. Let me know what you think about it. If you would like more videos like this and also like to learn more about my journey as a game dev, like and subscribe to my channel or join my Discord channel for more updates. See you next time.